Eric, this is huge news.
Yeah, Breaky posted a new video?
No, something important.
You almost lost your job due to the imminent collapse of the U.S. automotive industry?
No, that happens every 3 weeks. Much more important than that.
I got it, right. WotC's got another Universe Beyond set. Let's go.
No, even more unbelievable.
I don't know, man. That seems like the most unbelievable thing ever.
Games Workshop is releasing a new edition for a game they make.
Yeah? Like every summer for several years now, that's kind of what they do.
But this time it's Horus Heresy, Eric.
So, like, they're adding new stuff, not just the same Space Marine kits and some, like, rules updates.
That's the coolest part. No!
Cool. So, 12-hour long Horus Heresy video when?
Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 166. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going? And you actually nailed it this time.
What did I screw up last time?
Oh, I don't know. It's only 12 minutes in.
It's fine.
Probably will fix it in post.
We have mere hours until my voice doesn't work anymore, so we have to get into this episode. So without any further ado, let's get into a news segment before we get into the actual topic.
Right, the topic that we didn't tell anybody about.
Do you people click these without reading the actual title, or at least like the thumbnail on YouTube?
The way that you said that is so fucking... Do you people not have any phones?
Do I have to tell you? You know what? Okay, we're doing Finding Every Faction's Eternal Rule this week.
Sounds good. All right, so what's our further ado news?
First up, patrons in the audience, the patron poll ends May 23rd, so make sure you get your votes in. It's a close race. Your vote matters. Hashtag Pokemon go to the polls.
Yeah, you've got like a week from when this episode is airing, so make sure to go do your voting.
And in more important news for the rest of our audience, we're doing another book club.
Hell yeah.
This time we're going to do Elemental Council, because we've been told to read it like 400 times now by the comments.
And it has been a while since the last book club, so it's about time that we actually read something.
And hopefully this time the narrator won't be so bad that they have to re-narrate the entire book.
No, it seems good so far. I took a quick look at it just to make sure. This audiobook should be okay.
You have like, let's call it 8 weeks from now before that book club will happen. It is a long book though. It's like 17 hours or something audiobook wise. So it's like a third of a Brandon Sanderson novel.
I was going to say, it's not like wild like some of the books, but it's definitely on the longer side for Warhammer books. So 8 weeks should be enough time for everybody to read it that actually like really wants to read it, and we're not spoiling stuff for anyone.
Get a hold of it, get it in your schedule to flip through a book. There's no pretty pictures throughout, I'm sorry, just filled with those disgusting words that tell you things, and we'll do a nice fun episode all about it.
That's it for the news though. That's the further ado.
So without any further ado, let's jump into our topic at hand.
Sounds good. Let's start with what the hell we're talking about. What's every faction's eternal rule, and how are we going to find it?
Okay, so this came up all the way back at the beginning of 10th, when Death Guard got Disgustingly Resilient taken away from them. And a lot of people were very angry about it.
Right, that was Death Guard's thing. They're tanky with Disgustingly Resilient.
Yes, which they had for exactly 2 editions.
Hey, that's enough to draw a line.
It does get into the... 2 points can be a pattern.
Exactly. I can extrapolate from that.
It does get into the discussion of what the core identity of every army is, what the rule or at least the theme of a rule should they always have access to.
Right. This is like a meeting expectations kind of thing. The example of Death Guard is, oh, it did not meet expectations. People are angry. Bring back Disgustingly Resilient.
Yeah, and we don't have perfect answers for all of the factions. This is going to be more of a free-form discussion episode as we bounce ideas off each other, because some of these we kind of slam dunked pre-episode just by both naming the exact same thing we think should always exist for a faction. Some of these we got no idea, and we got to think of like what we consider the core specific identity of that faction. And this isn't to say these factions can't be more than this. It's just this should always be there.
So I guess, I don't know, we start in the normal order as always with sisters.
Sure. Specifically, let's move Space Marines down a bit, because I think they're actually one of the harder ones to discuss, because it's a little weird weird in my head. I think Sisters is one of the absolute easiest. We're both in agreement it's Miracle Dice.
Absolutely. 100%.
Miracle Dice are such a good idea for a mechanic. Exact implementation can obviously change over time. They don't have to work the exact same way every edition, but the idea of sacrificing yourself to cause miracles to occur, to make that the entire identity of the faith of Sisters and all of that represented in play.
The whole style of how the martyrdom's shown in game mechanics of, get a die that lets you basically cheat a roll, that is pretty core to Sisters, I think, from themes and just how they have played in the past of, all right, yeah, you're going to be sacrificing them, but that's also going to further your overall goal and give you more power in a way.
And we have seen they're not always overpowered by any means. There's been several points where they're straight up bad, even with access to Miracle Dice. There have been moments where they're busted. But the point is, it's not like it's a super problematic mechanic or anything, and I think it makes for a good core for Sisters.
No, it definitely is a tricky one to get perfect balance on.
Yes, cheating at a dice game is obviously a very strong mechanic to make your core identity. It does work well with frail factions like Sisters and Eldar when we get there. It's a neat mechanic that definitely gives your specific army a very good amount of flavor compared to anyone else. No one else can really be mistaken for Sisters in that way. Even if you gave Tzeentch Destiny dice from the AOS side of things, like the ability to cheat dice with their own flavor, it doesn't have the miracle martyrdom aspect to it, right? We don't mistake the way Eldar does it in 40K with the way Sisters does it.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the prime things to bring up, specifically in Miracle Dice, is like there's the martyrdom theme of there's a self-sacrifice from the Sisters to get this miracle that can happen that you can take advantage of. That little flavoring design space doesn't take away from other flavor design spaces that also manipulate dice. They have to be noticeably different, and the Sisters Miracle Dice is a core concept to how they work, and I would be disappointed if they didn't have that in any edition. The next one, Custodes, was a little bit tricky though.
Yeah, this one we don't have an actual answer for out the gate. So obviously, like the core identity, if we're thinking Custodes and Sisters of Silence, Custodes side of things is the ultra most elitist elite thing that is human.
You are the best of the best of the best of the best, kind of, whatever that Men in Black quote was.
Then the sister side is obviously being a blank.
Anti-psycher. And
yeah, anathema psychona. So that one is very obvious to always have that for the Sister of Silence side. That's not the important part for like what we got to talk through here. It's the other half with Custodes. What makes a custodian gameplay wise? And to me, a big part of it is defensive eliteness. The fact that they are just brick shit houses, like just shy of a vehicle to get off a board.
Right.
Like in 9th edition, it was Aegis of the Emperor was like their constant 4-up invuln and their mortal wound stopping and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. And just like their general save profiles being very strong.
I don't think Martial Kata is the core identity, is one of the main things to take away here.
True.
I think Martial Kata's is adorable and it's fine. That tank knows Kung Fu, I guess.
And I like that as a additional kind of thing where it's like, yeah, they're super elite and like they've clearly trained in like, you know, special ways of combat or whatever you want to do. But I think I'm with you of Custodians' core identity. Their eternal rule is just being defensively elite infantry.
It's the playing defense, I think, is like the true core concept. Not just being defensively elite, but also like you could interpret it as holding points.
Yeah.
Holding on to what you already possess. Very few dudes able to hold off against hordes.
And I think that makes good lore representation as well of being like the defenders of Terra and the throne, and like they're the ones that are defending and holding that. And yeah, the Custodes do a solid job of just sitting on a point and being like, ignore me or we're gonna just not go away and you're gonna lose.
And when we're talking about these, we're not talking about every specific sub-faction, though, like things representing the Vaults of Terra. Dreadhost is the one I liked. I liked their dropping down, running out, and instant teleport in, punch you in the face, right? There is cool aspects that don't have to be the core identity of an army that should still, you know, like, hey, that's sick.
Right.
That should be there in addition, but we're talking about like the one core thing I think is the defensive holding points. You can have alternative ways within.
And definitely, since there are like sub-factions or, you know, your detachments and whatever the like
flavor of the edition,
those can all have their own additional bits and pieces. And like optimally, it'd be great to do some callbacks to like previous editions that worked really well. And it's like, people enjoyed that. Let's bring it back. Hey, yay. But like those all build upon this core faction eternal rule identity. And, you know, that has to exist for these sub-factions to really shine. So
AdMech is at least two things, obviously. And I think it's just Doctrina Imperatives for the Skitarii half and Canticles of the Omnissiah for everything on the Mechanicum half, right?
Right.
That's how it worked in 9th. It was a great way to show off both parts of the army, to show how they are treated differently within. They are two core rules for a mashed up army.
Right. And I think that shows that like you don't have to have just one, because like the Doctrina on its own would be like, oh, we're missing something.
Yeah. And like with Custodes, the Sisters of Silence portion has the Anathema, Psychona, Anti-Psyker type stuff, right? It can be an answer that it's actually two things when you've got two armies tied together, or four demons.
I do think AdMech is a tough one, because like looking at how Doctrina and Canticles were implemented from 9th to 10th, it's still all there. And like it shows like, yes, you can make pretty big changes and still keep the core rule identity theming going on. Maybe they went a little too far this time, but I do think that those are the core parts that we would have to have.
Moving into IG, the Astra Militarum here has orders, which has basically always been their, hey, you got a guy yelling orders at everybody. You've got all the classic orders everyone loves shouting. I don't think I would want to make anything else the core concept. That said, there are other key parts of this with the wall of guns, the infinite hordes of humanity, the different ways you could flavor things that I don't think I'd be overly upset with either. But I think orders is just one that everyone loves.
It's one of those that like the infinite waves of humanity, the horde aspect of Astra Militarum is absolutely core, but I think that is less of like an eternal rule and more of an eternal model. Like you have to have those models, and because those models exist, you have that identity.
Yes.
But yeah, orders are just so guard.
They are. I do love the idea of the chain of command being represented, like the modern military aesthetic, right? I like that part of Guard from a keeping them feeling unique to everybody else. So that's like a pretty easy one in my opinion. What's not an easy one for us to pin down is next.
Yeah, Grey Knights.
It's hard, isn't it?
It is pretty hard. They're the Psychers.
They are all Psychers, which is a key part I think needs to be within whatever their identity rule is.
Right. They're also elite, but they're not the same way as Custodes. Like they're elite because they're all Psychers, essentially. That's what elevates them.
They're treated as like a more private order than the rest of Marines. Secretive might be the wrong word, but like a more...
like they're an actual separate branch to the military as opposed to being like under this overarching branch.
Yeah, specifically because they are part of the Inquisition and instead of part of Space Marines and all that stuff, they're treated completely differently. So I think there's like a combo there of Psyker and Inquisition-y Psyker. There's some viciousness to it to me in my head.
All right, yeah.
They're also the anti-demon if we want to talk about that portion of it. And I don't think that should ever go away either. You could argue it is one of the most core concept is anti-demon or anti-chaos, just in general.
That would make a lot of sense. It's tough though to do that from a rules aspect without it either being...
They are problematic rules. They are absolutely obnoxious. When we get to Death Watch, they've always had the same issue. It is either your rule does not affect your opponent or your rule is custom designed to screw over your one opponent.
Yeah, and then like if it's not strong enough to do that second part, then it's literally just fluff and it more or less could have just been ignored.
Yeah.
And so like that style of rule is tough to be like, oh, that's your eternal rule. But that theming absolutely makes sense because like that's kind of what they do.
So in 9th edition, you had the tides, right? the Masters of the Warp. You also had what Thousand Suns did as a counterpart, which is the Infinite Smite spam. That's a fun way to show off the psycherness.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because of 10th.
Yes, 10th is a problem itself, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, if 10th didn't more or less gut Psychic, I feel like Grey Knights would be a lot easier to nail down. The fact that they've been kneecapped essentially, I can't point to be like, oh, this is how we represent the Psychic part, other than literally there's a tag in your keyword. And part of this is my own bias. As a Grey Knights player who enjoyed the Psychic stuff going on, it's, more obvious to me of like, it feels like Grey Knights missed out on 10th because they didn't hit the eternal rule of being like the Psychers.
Oh, that and the fact in 13 months we'll be playing 11th and you don't have a codex yet.
That doesn't help. True. So I do feel like Grey Knights has kind of missed out. It's still there. It's not prominent enough that I would be like, oh, that's a great example of an eternal rule showing off factions' identities.
And I expect this is an episode where we're going to get tons of people in YouTube comments having their own thoughts on what their ideal forever rule for their faction is, which I will obviously encourage halfway because of the veiled we need you to engage. But also I actually read the damn comments and I like this conversation. But Grey Knights is one where it's like, let's spitball. I've got no idea what I think the ideal Grey Knight rule is. I don't think Tides was perfect. I liked it, but you don't need Tides every edition. I'm not like, oh my god, Tides is gone. It's like, oh my god, Psychic is a gun. And also
right.
You don't even have a fucking hammer. We're getting to like what core rule you should have. How about the fucking models with hammers should have a hammer? We haven't gotten that fucking far.
Right. Similar to like Astra Militarum, they're the horde army kind of thing. And that's like the models have to exist and like the rules have to work around those models. That's like the baseline. Grey Knights has not quite made it past that baseline in 10th, but they do have the whole like teleporty,
and I do think the teleporting stuff has always been a like awesome secondary thing with Grey Knights. It should still be there every edition, but I don't think it's the core.
It's a great secondary.
Like we said with like the Dreadhost thing of Custodes, that's how I feel about the teleporting with Grey Knights. It should be there, but I don't think it needs to be the core identity of it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have 11th edition.
I love that you skipped over your codex. You're like, I don't even have hopes for that piece of shit. We're just skipping to, I just gotta last 13 more months in a prayer.
At this point, that's basically it, yeah. And they'll re-solidify some of the faction's identity. But Imperial Agents, they're like not really a faction. They're too new.
If I were to say something, it is the soupy nature. It's the fact that they can be anywhere. Like an assassin can be with anybody. It's kind of stupid to be like your identity is soup. But I think it's a valid one, especially when we get down to Ynnari and it's the same deal. Your point is the glue.
Fair. That makes sense.
The mixing and matching is what I'll call it. That's to me Imperial Agents through and through. I don't think it needs like any specific implementation. Soup is always iffy in games. Everybody knows. Soup is either absolutely useless and bad or not allowed or is always the best thing to do and you should always soup for this faction and therefore you're never actually playing your faction. You're playing a soup list of the best parts of these other factions. And apart from agents, who are obviously like a half faction, Imperial Knights is the first of the like truly young factions we're talking about here, right?
Sure.
Imperial Knights, I think, nailed it with Bondsman. I will stay on this one for forever. Bondsman was such a good idea for making healthy lists while being thematic. I love the squire and the knight nature of it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It gives a good identity to why you have a list of just knights without like a supporting infantry on the ground kind of thing.
And it helps with balance so you don't end up in Chaos Knight hell.
Yeah.
But I do think, honestly, the dual nature of that with Code Chivalric is a really nice way to show off the knightliness. You've got on the one hand your bondsman, on the other hand you've got your taking an oath, earning honor. I think both halves of that can be the core together. We do know that currently bondsman died instead of the fucking chivalry 3, which is the opposite of what should have happened for that balance update. It's bothered me for like literally a year and a half now, but whatever. But the point is, together they are probably correct.
I would agree with that. I feel like Bondsman might be the slightly more important one.
From a game making standpoint, it is. From a flavor standpoint, it might actually go to Code Chivalric.
Yeah, but honestly, together they do a great job of like adding that flavor into this faction that only has 8 models.
Bro, soon we're getting a 9th one. It's another half upgrade sprue. It's
Woo!
1.5 guns and a top bonnet.
Hey, I love that. I'm also excited for my upgrade sprue.
I unironically, for what it's worth, that's a fine way to expand knights slowly. It's a cheap way manufacturing wise to get you another way to play a knight. Totally fine. I would like Cerastus frames to get properly adopted into 40k and not in this halvesy bullshit way where we cement that they are a 40k identity, get them on some book covers, make me comfortable telling people to go buy the coolest type of knight, but that's a different discussion.
All right, we've kind of held off on this long enough. We got to dig into Space Marines now. This is so difficult just because of...
It's like Grey Knights where I don't have a specific rule. It's not you just say the rule and we're done.
No, and because Space Marines have their like chapters, each of those have their own thing, I guess. But like, how do you tie it all together?
Yeah, you're never going to get Raven Guard and Iron Hands to agree what the core concept of a Space Marine is. They literally are opposites, but both wear black.
It's tough on what to do there.
I think the correct thing, let's talk about Space Marines as a whole because all of them have to inherit this, right? Like this is the core thing, and I chalked it up to what I called tactical adaptability. The idea that they are the Swiss Army knife.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
However we represent that each edition. So we had the Doctrines in 9th, 10th edition had like changing your oath target type deal, which kind of works for it too in my opinion, but I liked the other version better.
It's a little bit more loose for the like adaptability, but it's still one of those showing off like some amount of on the fly tactical changes on like how the battlefield's going. We're gonna figure out what needs to be done.
And I don't care at a detail level how we do it with Space Marines each edition. You can flavor it however you want at a specific level. They've got a billion catchphrases you can use every single edition, but I think that is the core concept of what makes a Space Marine, like versus every other type of man and tin can in this game.
It does show off these are super trained soldiers, so they're always able to figure out the best tactics in the battlefield at the time.
Yeah, and then you can obviously have your sub-factions where this is the fast one. Their White Scars is happy. Here's the sneaky one. Okay, Raven Guard is happy. Here's the one that will be broken for 3 months and then get nerfed to oblivion. That'll be Iron Hands. That you can do for in addition to the tactical adaptability core.
Right.
Then, because I don't want to listen to this in every comment, let's talk about Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Deathwatch, Space Wolves, and Black Templars. Blood Angels is easy. Red Thirst, Black Rage. Always represent those and you're good to go.
Yeah, I feel like a bunch of these are all pretty obvious. Like Blood Angels, that's their shtick.
You say it's obvious, but what's Dark Angel's obvious one? The we're more special than everybody else who's special. We're the Swisser Army or Knifer.
Basically, yeah, we've got a cool Primarch back. Haha, losers.
I did say knightliness is the one thing I'll give Dark Angels. I almost feel like you take one out of Imperial Knight's book here and you do just trying to bring the knightliness into it. And I'm aware we've got our 3-wing aspect with Dark Angels. You could say plasma, but like it's weird. Dark Angels has so many halvesy, you can't make them happy without an extra 5,000 words to describe how extra cool they are versus everybody else for the reasons why.
Right. I think the 3-wings kind of are just baked into Dark Angels at a certain point, but showing off the knightliness, as you said, they haven't done a great job of it.
They do it at a model level well. From the new models, 10 out of 10. Even Absolutely. I like them, and I hate this. When you win me over, it's a win.
But at a rule level, I think they got to cook still, but I think you're right. That's what it should be. Deathwatch, kill all the Xenos.
Yeah, it's the anti-Xenos thing. And this is where we get into, like, this is a very bad rule.
Similar to the Grey Grey Knights, anti-demons.
You don't actually write this rule in a way that would make a Deathwatch player happy, because it is going to feel god-awful if you're not against a Xeno, and it's going to feel fucking miserable for the Xeno player when you do randomly get paired against one. So Deathwatch is weird. I hate it as a faction. It will exist forever anyway.
But some way of showing that without actually like tilting the scales too much is probably fine, especially for Space Marines.
The current implementation's kind of a mess, like looking at it right now again. We could say the core of it is the kill team aspect of, instead of going with anti-Xeno, which is just a problem and a half, right?
You just go with the grab some from everybody.
Focus on the crazy mixed unit. You've got a Space Wolf next to an Ultramarine. That's the best defense for Deathwatch. Go that route instead of boot camp.
And that shows a better gameplay. I mean, I don't know that much about the lore to say, but from what I understand, they take from everybody. So like showing that would be in character at least.
I don't know how you want to represent it, but like there's something about having well-rounded skill sets within a single unit. And I think kill teams themselves could be altered to be less of a goddamn mess.
That's a whole nother topic.
That's a different can of worms, but we could do something with that spiritually. I almost want to say, just because this would like make a Deathwatch player just lose their mind and salivate. The models you put in a kill team change the rule the kill team has. Like the more varied the models in the kill team, the more innate buffs they have, even though those buffs will be less useful because you've got a dude with a flamer next to a dude with a plasma gun next to a dude with a fucking power fist, right? But now you've got your Dark Angels buff, your Ultramarine buff, your Iron Hand buff. From a gameplay standpoint, it's still a nightmare, but I don't think there's any way Deathwatch exists where it's not a living nightmare.
Yeah, but like some twist on the tactical adaptability of Space Marines as a whole that was like focused on grabbing a little bit from everybody and then, you know, using those to somehow make it better than the sum of their parts or whatever that's saying is. It's messy.
Yeah, but that's how I think I'd go about Deathwatch, is trying that, because I think that's a sales pitch that everyone likes.
I think so. And it's something that actually works other than anti-Xenos. But Space Wolves, they've got wolves.
Yeah, making everything say wolf and fang is correct.
But a bit further than that, I suppose. The sagas are pretty cool.
Yes, sagas and character building. I think for your average closet furry, making an OC is very important.
Yeah.
And that's why character building is the core of Space Wolves. I unironically think the Viking saga, creating the story for the character, I really think Space Wolves could be one of the ideal places for Build-A-Bear characters.
Oh, absolutely.
A different episode topic we've had in the can for a while here of talking about our love of how you could kit out a 9th edition character to be your dude, right?
The character building's tough for 10th, but yes.
It sucks. But Space Wolves could be the one spot where you really push it. Like you use your Space Marine static core, that's your basis, and then you take that tactical adaptability and you crank it to like 11 on your character.
Yeah.
And like their characters can be like, has slain a hive tyrant, once cut off the leg of an avatar of Cain, this one time he did something with a wolf.
Oh no. I do think that Space Wolves have a great opportunity of taking advantage of the Space Marines' general adaptability to customize the characters during gameplay, as opposed to just doing it in list building. Because of 10th edition, like list building character stuff is super cool. 9th was great for that. But even in 10th, where we don't have anywhere near the character customization, we do have some of that, like during gameplay, you get certain things for achieving goals, and Space Wolves could do that pretty well. So yeah, I could see the whole character building being like the core, and then how that's implemented being on sagas or during list building or whatever would be the edition changes, but that could be cool. Black Templars though, you want to take this one, Brad? You love them.
I think the core identity of Black Templars as an army is their ability to be a flag for the fact that you're going to have to ban someone from the YouTube comment section for some out-of-pocket shit they're about to post.
Yeah, it's not every Black Templars player, but the problematic comments are very commonly Black Templars.
There's a whole lot of whatever cross they're claiming isn't the really bad cross that they use attached to people who are banned. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's some type of dog whistle.
Yeah.
Strange, that one. Anyway, so obviously they do actually have a pretty good setup with the crusading, having the oaths and keeping to your oaths to get a bonus, breaking your oath, nerfing you. That's a good shtick for them. I get them from that angle as much as I love making fun of them constantly. It works. I'd keep going with that route and then delete the entire faction and never talk about them again.
Trying to show off the religious crusading can be tough to like have the flavor right in the game, but I think that that's where you want to have their identity rules showing off. It's tough because like they feel so generic in that way. Like they hit people hard, but they say they're religious about it.
It's almost like the real life issues.
Yeah, it's almost like neither of us actually enjoy that.
Very shocking.
So before we get more and more hate comments, let's move on to chaos.
Okay, so Chaos Demons I want to save for last because that's, like Space Marines, a discussion.
All right, then let's do knights.
So Chaos Knights, it's a young army. This is extremely young. We're talking 8th edition young here. I don't think we've hit it.
No, we haven't.
I think 9th edition had some good ideas mixed in with some terrible ideas for how they were handling Chaos Knights. The best of it, absolute top tier correct thing, was Favor of the Dark Gods.
All right, good. I was worried you were going to say Harbingers of Dread.
No, absolutely not. Never. Absolutely not Harbingers of Dread.
All right. Favor of the Dark Gods was...
So Favor of the Dark Gods, in 9th edition, you did not pay points for your relics or for your warlord traits. Now just called enhancements, and there's less of them, and you only get one, and you don't get to double stack, and now they cost points.
Yeah. Keep going.
All the problems of 10th edition character building. In addition to getting to just take artifacts of warlord traits on all of your knights to make them better, they got an extra layer. So now you could have an artifact, a warlord trait, and you could have a Favor of the Dark God. And you could pick however many of these there were. I think there was like 15 or 20 of them. And each of them had their different point count they increased your knight by and gave them a different pretty beefy buff. Some of them were simple and easy. Some of them were really flashy, but situational. Some of them gave them like whole auras and other stuff. They were a great way to make a faction with 11 models total feel like something where you had a lot of choice when you built your list. Like you were making the legendary your dudes, right?
Yeah, I remember that a lot of those were themed around the different gods. So it'd be like, oh, you're going to have your Tzeentch war dog.
Yeah, and you could make it where you theme your army as all Tzeentch, or you theme it as like half Tzeentch and half Khorne, or you go, I'm going to have 4 big knights and each one has a different god. It was so good and flavorful for Chaos Knights specifically. Such a good idea. And then 10th edition ruined everything that was remotely good about 9th edition Chaos Knights, which wasn't much to begin with because it was still War Dog spam at the end of the day. And now there is like literally nothing left.
It was an interesting show of why Chaos Knights are different than Imperial Knights other than they've got spikes.
Yes.
It definitely 10th edition's trimming down on character customization and that kind of stuff has definitely ruined the Favor of the Dark Gods option.
It's hurt factions like this the most, where the less options you have and the less things you can field, the less you feel attachment to your army, the less you feel like you've made a choice.
Yeah, and like even other than that, there's only so many permutations to the list that you can have as your list.
Correct.
So, yeah, I don't know. There definitely are ways that you could bring Favor of the Dark Gods into 10th, but I do think that you're right on that theming, that style of rule should be their core.
Yeah, I love the stuff that we did with in 9th edition, we had like the Infernal households versus the Dread households. There was a bunch of layers to make knights more interesting when you've only got 5 models in play and you only had 11 to pick from in the first place. That helped so much, and I have to hammer home that these are the factions where this is so important.
Yeah, but I think you did focus in on Favor of the Dark Gods, and that customizability I think is like more core than just like the Dread households or whatever, because like that style of like household stuff is still useful and definitely something that like flavor it in, sprinkle it in as needed and kind of thing. But I think that showing off the customization and linking to the different gods really do deviate from the Imperial Knights enough that it's like, oh yeah, this is like really, they're unique, they're their own thing. A bit of a letdown in 10th so far.
They weren't in a great spot in 9th to begin with. I'm not going to pretend it was sunshine and rainbows.
Right, but let's move on to Chaos Space Marines. Not quite as many options as Imperial Space Marines.
So for Chaos Space Marines, it's a little bit more complicated because they are Space Marines. They have entirely too much lore and people care too much about it. Less so than Loyalist Space Marines because they spend more time as cannon fodder than them.
But there's a lot of characters that have baggage.
There's a lot of everything that has baggage. So like you can't do the easy one of saying you want it to be either Dark Pacts or Marks of Chaos or any of that, because then you get into, well, my specific Legion of Night Lords would never do Dark Pacts with Chaos stuff because we have a trilogy of books about how we don't do that, even though there's a bunch of subtext in those books about how we do that, but we never would. And you've got your old Iron Warriors players who are like, we never dealt with demon stuff, even though new Iron Warriors does, because they started selling demon engine kits and they wanted to paint them Iron Warriors colors.
Or like for like 9th Marks of Chaos, it was like, you know, choose your god or whatever. Could be a little weird, I guess, on like how you want to split that up.
It's one where it's a little bit awkward because you try to pick something that'll work for all of them, but because you've got like the half who are like, fuck yeah, fuck me up, Chaos, and then you've got the other half who are like, I would never, I just fell from grace.
Yeah, we were trying to take down the false emperor. There's nothing about chaos involved.
Because of that duality, and we'll have a whole topic in a different upcoming episode about this, there's not an easy way to please all of the CSM players. There's always going to be back and forth. And I think that's why for like their core base rule that every single one of the legions has to deal with, well, other than the 4 who have their own entirely different books because they're specific god worship. But for all of the other ones, I think you have to choose something like with the Votann stuff in
oh my god.
What?
I just totally, the wonton.
Yeah, you forgot about wonton soup?
I did forget about it. You brought it up and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Oh, right.
Slight history lessons for those who forgot the end of 9th edition. CSM, with their codex, after many years of waiting, got a wonderful rule that did a good job of acting as a foil to the Space Marine combat doctrines, which was wonton destruction, wonton massacre, and wonton slaughter. These were basically the evil, air quotes, version of the combat doctrines. So that way you're spiky Space Marines. In the end, you were all the same thing. It's just what side of a war you're on.
And they're not actually called that. It's wanton destruction, but...
Yeah, it's wonton.
Yeah.
And it had an ability where you could have all of your wanton destruction, wanton massacre, and wanton slaughter. You could have them all at once. And everyone dubbed it wonton soup.
It was pretty cool in like... why did you name it that way? But like wanton is like an actual word. It has meaning.
Yeah, it means a delicious dumpling.
Exactly. All right, but yeah, the style of those, I could see where you're going with that.
Of keeping it where you are still, while you're more ragtag and your more collateral damage is acceptable and encouraged, you are still Space Marines. And you keep that as your core concept to always act as the foil to a loyalist Space Marine. And then when you get into your sub-factions, you get into your fuck me up gods.
Right. But like having a weird distorted mirror image of Space Marines' tactical adaptability in the wanton style of 9th However, that needs to be implemented for the edition. I'm with you on that. That makes sense. Because I was having trouble with Chaos Space Marines. Because it's like Dark Pact, it's not it. And Mark of Chaos was kind of neat. But since we have all the 4 special ones sectioned off into their own thing, there's some weird tensions going on and how to balance that. And it's like, I don't like that either.
I like Mark of Chaos. I would just do a slight variation on it, specifically for the people with their custom OC warband that never felt a Chaos right, and anyone playing Renegades where that's supposed to be a whole different. We're gonna have an episode discussing this later. Anyway, the Mark of Chaos I would have 6 total options. They are the 4 gods, obviously, Undivided, and then Spurn the Gods.
Sure.
And have Spurn the Gods give you something to represent like the lack of corruption. Each of them corrupts you in some way, like giving you some specific Tzeentch ability or make you better in combat with Khorne or whatever. Have it be like you get better bonuses from your evil combat doctrines, however they get done for the edition, right?
Basically have the flavor on top to change the core structure just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little thing that I think just helps make an otherwise good but complained about rule much less complained about.
I see where you're going on that. And that works pretty well with the weird mirror of Space Marines.
Yeah, because we get into the whole like Chaos Space Marines also includes Renegades now, which we could have the discussion about Renegades in the Primaris era should probably not be treated the same way. Anyway, the CSM dual nature of how people see it being properly represented is difficult, and trying to keep them feeling different yet the same as Space Marines as they should be. It's like we are equals on opposite sides of a war that alters both sides, but in ways that doesn't truly make one better or worse than the other.
Yeah, and then like actually extrapolating that into gameplay for balance. All right, yeah. But the core idea there, I see where you're going, which I guess, I mean, that kind of leads us into the 4 gods chosen ones. So Death
and
Guard.
I think, again, these ones have always had lots of flavor to them. It's easy to tell you about the 4 gods. Everyone can do this, but going through them real fast, Khorne is not actually casino as their core concept. I know this is shocking. The Khorne Casino is fun, but I don't think it is by any means required.
It's the like fun flavor on top that like we could do a callback to it. It would be great, but it's not like that has to be part of the next edition.
To me, Khorne's main thing here with World Eaters is the nails, essentially Blood Angels Red Thirst.
It's very similar, yeah.
The equivalent of, we want that to be the core identity of World Eaters at all points. It should be about Unga Bunga, charge into melee, get bonuses. Being on offense makes you better, not being reactive, instead being proactive. That's what you want on World Eaters.
And how it's specifically shown is fine. That can change.
Yeah, there can be all sorts of ways, and I don't hate the Corncino. It's definitely more of a Tzeentch thing, though, so it's so weird to me.
It's neat, though. It's not in opposition to expectation. It's not quite the Unga Bunga.
It's just, if I told you a Chaos God has a casino and your characters can get buffs that make them cheat at the casino, you'd be like, oh, we're talking about Tzeentch. I get it. No, actually,
that would
it's
be
Khorne.
the expectation. Yeah. Right.
Anyway, Emperor's Children, the youngest of armies, but it has existed for forever, is the speedy, fast, melee duelist, more finesse than Khorne's Unga Bunga smash with club.
But also like Unga Bunga, go fast and hit them with like a rapier instead.
Yeah, it's the thinking man's Unga Bunga. Yeah, using the rapier instead of the club. It's the counterpart. The two ways to do that melee. One's a brawler versus one's a finessey live guy, right?
Right. And like these are both pretty large ideas essentially. So like there's a lot of different ways that they can be shown.
Yeah, but I don't think either of them have like a specific rule that everyone is like, oh God, if you don't do this specific iteration of the rule, you're doing a disservice to their lore. It's like they have a general identity you've got to hit that feels right.
And like Emperor's Children has to have some amount of like advance and charge.
Yeah, because again, they're the more finessey version.
And then Death Guard has a bit more of a, this is the rule that everybody expects in Disgustingly Resilient.
And I think part of this is because it's the rule they had when they were the Little Brother army. To a lot of people, it is the quintessential rule to them. Disgustingly Resilient, for those who don't remember it, is just a 5-up feel no pain. That's it. Or you do the -1 damage version of Disgustingly Resilient. There was both.
Yeah, I think 9th edition's like core was subtract 1 from damage. That whole reduce damage in some way, that's Death Guard. They're the slow ones, but they tank and they don't die.
Yeah. And I think that's an important part of it too, is the slowness. They were always the chonky boys who were going to be slower anywhere.
The creeping dread.
But they were inevitable. So however you wanted to represent that. I did like the general idea behind the debuff army that was poorly implemented at the beginning of 10th edition.
It's such a neat idea.
I think early Cruel Boys in AOS before the guttening was such a great implementation of that on the AOS side of like, we're the debuff army. We're not about making us good. We're about making you have none of your shit. You're going to feel terrible. Like you suddenly have no ability to shoot. You suddenly are limp-wristed in combat and can't do anything. Your armor's rusted through. You stepped on a caltrops on your way here. That is a great concept, but it's not what people want for Death Guard, even though I think it's fantastic to show off plagues and disease, but poorly implemented at the beginning of 10th.
I think it's one of those that, like, as much as we both like that debuff idea and we would like to see it implemented in a better way and continued iteration on it, the core idea and rule for Death Guard is that tanky, disgustingly resilient, the inevitability showing through that of they're slowly marching on you and nothing you do is going to remove them kind of thing. It would be nice to have the debuff as an additional flavor tacked on in a way so that like we can really like have a potential to flesh that out further in the future, as opposed to just being you really only have disgustingly resilient
and you have a bunch of tanks.
Yeah, that's all cool, but like
it's fine.
They don't really mesh all together, and I think the debuff idea really could take that and like spin it all together into a nice pizza pie.
I have the alternative of, okay, we pull a debuff from there, Death Guard didn't want it, and we make it for a different army. We'll get to that though. So for the last one here, Thousand Suns, this one's mine. I do think, being a fan of Thousand Suns and generally our lore, we are really bad at winning things, but it's okay. Thousand Suns, to me, one of the key things that always comes up and feels so right is the idea of a cabal of sorcerers. The idea of getting a bunch of magical dudes together in one place to cast a bigger magical spell than anyone else would. Being willing to be one with magic more and do the crazier stuff that no one else is willing to do. Approaching the idea of the warp differently than everyone. I do think Cabal Points is a solid implementation of that with a bunch of flaws we've talked about ad nauseum, and I'll do again for forever. But it's a good idea. I don't think it needs to be Cabal Points every edition, but I do love the idea of the ritual aspect. The more magic-y guys working together to create more powerful spells. That is throughout the Thousand Suns lore. It is everything to do with them. So Cabal of Sorcerers, the Cabal Points, all of that is correct and good. Implementation can change a lot sometimes, but it is a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I really don't have much more to say on Thousand Suns for that, because like, dude, 10th is just a problem. So yes, everything I agree with, but we still have Chaos Demons to get into, and oh boy, 4 factions in a trench coat. It's soup. Like that's the core, but like
I don't think so.
It isn't really enough.
I don't think Chaos Demons has ever had a universal rule that is correct, like truly correct, because again, it is 4 armies in a trench coat. We've had like good ideas before. Half of this though is like we could make cool characters.
Well, I mean, that's a large part of Chaos, like CSM as well.
And like Siege Demons wasn't even that good at spells, which is fucked up.
The current Shadow of Chaos is not terrible.
I hate it.
It just doesn't really do anything.
No.
It has potential to be something.
This is where the idea of Death Guard's debuff army thing should move to, in my opinion. When we look at demons, a demonic incursion, the warp making itself manifest, all of that, instead of playing with the goddamn make them take a fucking runaway test.
Just like actually straight debuff them.
Yeah, I want to instead maybe try, hey, demons are constantly affecting everybody around them.
The warp has changed enough enough in this local area for demons to spawn. So like you have to deal with just that as well.
And this is a little you and me thing, right?
Sure.
Going back to Grey Knights.
Yeah.
If demons is all about debuffing your opponent in various ways depending on what demons, etc., right?
Yeah.
You make it where one of Grey Knight's rules is they can never get worse in certain aspects of their data sheet.
Right.
Or like the classic you can ignore modifiers to this attack roll type stuff, right? You could do things like that in Grey Knights flavored as anti-demon stuff where it's generically useful just in general, like that happens.
Right, because like it does show up against like, you know, Space Marines or whatever. They'll have something that you're like, oh, hey, I found it.
Yeah, but against demons specifically, then it would feel like, oh, we're actually like really fighting each other here. Like this is a very direct ability that doesn't feel like it's targeted.
Yeah.
I kind of love this. I think it's a good way to make demons specifically feel different than when you separate them out and you play, you know, Death Guard with Nurgle and stuff and you just go into the disgustingly resilient stuff and all that. Or you do Emperor's Children and Slaanesh and you're running and charging everywhere to give demons an identity.
Yeah, and I do think that the idea of that debuffing has enough actual options in gameplay rules that you can be like, yeah, it's a debuff army, but if you're focused on Tzeentch, you're going to make it so that they can't shoot well or something like that. Like you can have some flavoring to it that you can tweak knobs on, but like in general, they're going to just demons debuff the enemy.
To give examples here, Tzeentch demons classically have always had the ability to make it where your opponent can't hit you on a random number, which sometimes will be 5 or 6 and be devastating, right? Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. We build on this. We build on a lot of the debuffs that they were playing around with Death Guard and Cruel Boys and all that. Get spread out into thematically good areas for it to be existing in a demon's rule, so that if you're playing a soup demon list with all 4 gods, you get access to all of it in lesser amounts. And then if you go like heavy Tzeentch Khorne, you get heavy access to these portions of it, but then you don't get these other debuffs.
There's a certain amount of like, if you have more soup, then you have access to more stuff, but there's less guarantee that you'll be able to do the thing at the right time.
Yeah.
Whereas like, oh, we're focused on Tzeentch, I'm pretty guaranteed that the Tzeentch part's gonna happen, or I'm just losing anyways and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That is a cool way of doing it.
That could be a fun way to both have Chaos Demons Codex and Nurgle Codex exist, which I would like. I still like splitting up the 4 gods and having dedicated codices for that god. I will beat on that drum forever.
Yeah.
But which does not mean to be a footnote in a single detachment of a goddamn code. Anyway, the excuse to have both of them and have them play different, and now you get that delicious thing that your investors want, where, oh, they got into Death Guard. Ooh, they souped Nurgle demons. Now they want Chaos Demons. Well, now they own Slaanesh Demons, so now they want to go buy Emperor's Children. Combo profit.
Yeah, it's just the chain of what's next is laid out for you in more obvious ways. It does work. And like even the whole debuff thing, you could still have undivided type stuff going on.
Yeah, hey, Undivided Demons is literally a data sheet right now. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter much until we actually get some Undivided Demons back.
But like there's enough potential just because like debuffs, there's like massive design space open still for that like, yeah, you could still do it. So that would make sense. It basically builds on the Shadow of Chaos in a way that affects things. And I think, wasn't there 9th edition had something weird with like Warp Storm or something like that? Not really the same thing, but in similar ideas.
Yeah, you can easily flavor it all. That's not a problem. So that wraps up Chaos. So now we just have Xenos left in this exceptionally long episode, I'm realizing.
I mean, that's how it goes when we're just talking.
It does when we're spitballing.
But all right, so I guess Aeldari. I mean, it's like the elf agile type thing.
So I hate saying this because I know it gets nerfed all the time. I really feel like Strike and Fade, the core concept of being agile in that way, when I know that like that stratagem in every iteration it's ever had ends up nerfed.
Well, yeah, it's really strong, especially like when you use it, it can be backbreaking kind of thing. So it's like, oh, we'll just make it cost 2 CP. Well, when it's needed, it's fucking disgusting. So
yeah, I think Strands of Fate is a good rule, and I wouldn't have issue with that just being it for forever. It's had terrible balancing issues throughout this edition specifically, but it's a fine rule universally for an identity that, again, is like Miracle Dice, but thematically different. It's about the fact that Eldar just can see the future and are really good at doing that.
And there's enough possibilities of how to flavor it so that like Miracle Dice and Strands of Fate are still like cheating on the same way, but like clearly different in how they're being presented. But yeah, that is pretty Aeldari to have Strands of Fate.
I feel like those two things combined is Eldar in my brain. The future seeing aspect and the being ninjas.
Being ninjas, yeah, basically. And so like Harlequins.
So for Harlequins, to me, it's the opposite of demons. It is the faction that their generic rules should be cheating the game, doing things that no one else is allowed to do, acting in ways that no one else is allowed to act. It worked well for them. They should continue to exist and continue to have that as their core concept. Yes, it is hard to balance, but they are a hyper elite army, and that's okay. It's nice to have the Aeldari equivalent of a custodian, someone other than a custodian who feels like, holy shit, why is that guy cheating? Cheating the game is their thing. The being able to move vertically for no cost, or walk across horizontal features ignoring them with their grav belts, or getting to do an action and still shoot because they're just nutty, whatever.
Yeah, because there's only so many data sheets, I think that works at a model level as opposed to creating a rule for the faction. You can have a bunch of different cheating at the game essentially for each unit type.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could implement it in a universal level too. But the general idea, I think, is to have something that feels like a opposite side of Custodes and demons through two different aspects. Of demons is all about the debuffing of someone else, whereas Harlequins is the inward version of that external thing where it's like, I'm going to make this game feel like I'm cheating.
Right. I'm playing a different game.
Yeah, I'm playing chess, you're playing checkers, idiot. Whereas Custodians get their, holy shit, look at the stats on that data sheet. No wonder there's only 20 dudes. And then Harlequins won't look that crazy from like a stat line standpoint. You're like, that's not the worst thing I've seen. And then you're like, they can do what now? And you end up with an elite army that isn't elite in stat line, they are elite in rule set.
Right.
And I think that's a very fun way to get a very different identity in play. You end up with variety within the same general archetype.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to finalize that, Ynnari would be, really, they would be the soup that kind of glues.
It's Imperial agents, but it's the Eldar equivalent.
Yeah, but based on that, like, let's talk about Drukhari then.
Drukhari, for me, the universal rule should always be some variation of power from pain. I am more of a fan of how 9th edition went than 10th. Some people like 10th edition better because it harkens back to ye olden days, even though it's ass.
I don't think it's that, but either way, that style is definitely what Drukhari's looking for.
It is such a simple idea. Even Druki in Total War work the same way, right? You are playing your dark elf of whatever faction, and hurting your opponent fills up your power bar, right? And you start getting buffs because you don't care what's happening as long as people are in torment, you're getting jacked on it.
Yeah, and that's really the, like, as things are going on in this battle, there's pain happening, and so we're gonna get stronger and
feed on it.
Which, however it's actually implemented there, that's the core.
Yes.
I see what you're saying on 9th.
9th edition worked a lot like it does in Total War, where the longer the battle goes on, the more buffs you have.
Right.
And it works well because it's a finesse army that is super easy to take off the board, but is very hard to actually get in combat with, so you are picking and needling until it is time to strike.
Right.
I loved 9th edition Drukhari. I really did.
But I mean, like, even 10th's more simplified version of it does a good job of showing off the idea.
Genestealer Cults.
Genestealer Cults. We all know what it is, but how to say that in a way that won't raise algorithm flags.
It is guerrilla warfare.
Ah, guerrilla warfare. Yes.
The honorable IED. The asymmetric warfare idea, the fact that it is basically fighting rebel soldiers, the popping up from anywhere, terrible intel on where I'm really trying to dodge certain words because of real life implications that YouTube will hate. That aspect of Genestealer Cults, the uprising, the trying to fight a local populace as opposed to trying to fight a well-armed military.
Yeah, so there has to be a decent amount of like hiding and then popping up unexpected, hitting and then not surviving or disappearing again.
Yes. Blips being a perfect example of this. I don't see a reason they shouldn't exist other than, yes, they slightly slow the game down from a setup standpoint. It's a little awkward at times, but it's a cool idea. The reinforcement tokens in 10th is a great version of it. I generally think they understand how to handle Genestealer Cults at that level.
Yeah.
All right, so Eric, would you like to talk about your favorite archetype in all of fantasy?
I feel like that's a segue for grippers, but let's talk about dwarfs instead.
Yes, those chonky dwarf feet. Eric enjoys dwarves in general. He was a big dwarf guy playing Total War. He likes the grudging.
Yeah, the whole idea of it's getting written in the book is entertaining to me. So yeah, I mean, Leagues of Votann is a very new army, but there's some history and a lot of like expectation of what it means to be a space dwarf. So the whole idea there of like the grudge, the judgment, that style, however it wants to be implemented.
I agree 100%. That is the core that has to exist. And then from there, you use that flavor and twist it by addition for rules. Like however you want to do, whether it be judgment tokens or whether it be something else, a revenge system of some type, however you do it, it's a great one for meta narrative too, for like if you're doing a crusade campaign.
Oh yeah. And it's definitely another take on how Adepta Sororitas martyrdom gives you these miracle dice, whereas like the Leagues of Votann can be like, oh, you killed my brother, now your name's in the book and I'll have forever a grudge. So like similar ideas but playing in entirely different ways. Leagues of Votann is still just such a new faction, which is okay, like it's a solid start.
But I think if you're picking one rule, even if we get, let's say they start opening up Votann lore, like the actual Votann, the machines.
Right, the AI things.
Yeah, we start going that route and we get more stuff from that angle, and that becomes your secondary main ability. Like we've said, a couple people have like what we consider two main abilities depending. Even if you go that route, I think grudges is a great core one to always stay.
I'm totally with you. The grudges are like, this one has to stay. It would be nice if we had something else as well, but grudges are just, that's the dwarf way. So I think they nailed it pretty well, which I guess, I mean, it leads us into Necrons, which I think are another pretty obvious slam dunk.
It's a slam dunk. It's reanimation protocols. However they get represented for the edition, it's been changed 100 billion times. I actually kind of like the current version. Reanimation protocols is a core identity of Necrons. It's what you always expect to be there. It is the historical Necron thing, and I don't expect they were ever going to pick anything else anyway, so it was pretty much locked from the start. There you go.
It just does such a good job of like showing off like the undying nature kind of thing. It's cool. It works really well with the aesthetics, and at this point it's locked in.
The immortality dead aspect, it is Necrons.
So Orks, another one that like fucking slam dunk.
To me it's two things, because obviously there's the Wa, right?
It's the Wa. Without the Wa, you're not an Ork.
But I also think 10th's biggest fumble on Orks was the loss of Daka, and then turning it into a detachment but not doing any math when implementing it. Well, more treating it like we did, where you're like, okay, if you do this on a shooter, it doesn't mean anything, but then people will use it on more obscure stat lines that we didn't actually think of on day one.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like we had some fun with it, and it's like, oh, we can come up with something that's a little dirty, but like maybe it's fine. Yeah, with a little bit of extra thought, a little ridiculous.
But when you design it from the get-go, Daka, I think is a core aspect of orkiness. Like everyone can quote it. When people think Orks, they think of the Wa, the Daka, the tech that don't quite make sense, the ramshackle stuff. That's Orks, baby. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I do think it's one of the ones where there's really two strong ones. Like Wa is obviously first place, but I think you don't want an edition where there's not that silly rule there.
In 10th, when they didn't have the like shooty, the Daka, it was a hole that like it felt missing. It was like, holy shit, there's like an entire fundamental idea of the army that's missing. So I do agree.
There's a wing of models that don't have a core buff. Like, they just sat there as a naked data sheet.
Yeah, and it was always like, how do I manipulate these other things to make it kind of sort of maybe work? Yeah, I'm with you. The fact that that whole felt so missing, Daga definitely is another secondary one that orcs just have to have. So Tau.
Oh, Tau.
So like my initial was like Markalite, but that's not a fucking rule.
No, the current iteration of For the Greater Good with spotted units and everything is much better than like the old, anyone who remembers Tau overwatching and everything and the hell.
Yeah.
Everyone overwatches.
Set up overwatches. Yeah.
I think the current iteration is better. I do think generally, as long as it's called For the Greater Good and feels like something where Tau units are buffing themselves by having units support each other and acting like a proper military force, that's the correct core concept for Tau. I would like it if it was less racist. The core rule affecting all of their sheets, now that they've got a solid 30% of their sheet saying Crute on it, let's not make it where it's a rule that doesn't affect the Crute.
I was thinking that same thing. I was like, the For the Greater Good and the theming and that kind of stuff is great. They need to do a better job of actually encompassing all of the Empire. We've gotten a surge in Crute, and that's great. It's like another part of showing that coalition style, but like, you gotta actually work with it. Right? Like, that has to be part of the whole, like, For the Greater Good thing.
So that's like the general thing for Tau. I don't feel very strongly. I feel like it is one of the ones that people are most open to change because it's been a problem for so many editions in a row. This edition, it was just kind of fine. It doesn't have pizzazz right now.
We've got the Crute, we've got the Gundams, we've got that kind of stuff, but like, let's continue to expand to the rest of the range and like see more, and then we can like, oh, actually tie it together.
Yeah. If you wanted to make For the Greater Good a different style again, you could do one where bringing more combined arm types give different buffs. Having battle suits in your army gives you X buff. Having at least a Crute unit gives you an X buff. Having, like you do it that way to try to show off that angle of it. I'm not saying this is better than doing the Marker Light edition it currently is. There's different ways you could handle it, whatever. But there's something here.
Yeah, and like we've said before, the exact specifics of how it's implemented change edition to edition and all that stuff. But I think you're on the right track of the current For the Greater Good has the idea. It just needs to actually encompass the rest of the faction in a more cohesive manner. I think they are moving towards that. It needs a little bit more time. See, Tau's still a new faction.
Older than our average audience member.
Yeah, right. They'll catch up to Space Marines eventually.
So, last up, Tyranids. What are you thinking?
So, Shadow in the Warp is a great thing from a thematic potential for implementation.
Tyranids has a lot of those snappy one-liner keywords, slogans, stuff like that. There's Shadow in the Warp, Synapse, Death from Below, all the fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'd argue Death from Below is also Genestealers, but whatever.
Sure. I mean, we got like the Unending Hunger or whatever, like all kinds of great things like that. But like a lot of it doesn't fit for the whole army idea.
A lot of it is baggage, I almost want to say. Like Synapse, for example. I feel like it has to exist because lore-wise, but Synapse is like never good, right? Synapse is almost always a built-in downside.
Yeah, it's a built-in downside, but like they have ways of taking advantage of it to like, oh, because of that, then you're gonna get buffs to other stuff and like let's combo. A lot of these things are like that where it's like there's some good flavor potential, but nothing's this like standout. Shadow in the Warp is probably the closest of like, if we don't have something like that, it feels like we're missing one of the only lore things that we have.
I would say the other thing is adaptability. Tyranid, there's always a specific bioform or iteration they learn over the course of battles. They send invasions in different waves, changing which bioforms are in which waves depending on what needs doing. That's the Tyranid Tyranid way it attacks.
Yeah, I think the current 10th edition invasion fleet has like the hyper adaptation.
That's a great example of it. And also, 10th edition did it where all of the sub-factions represent different waves of an invasion, which is neat. It's a cool way to show that fact.
I could see some changes to the hyper adaptations and like make that more generic, overarching with flavoring the different sub-factions based on it kind of thing, of like really showing like, yeah, Tyranids in general are super adaptive. They'll figure out the most efficient bioform for whatever needs to be done. But like these other ones have history of adapting to certain things. So that's their start point is big behemoth. This other one is start point is swarm. There's something there, yeah. But it's loose right now.
I think you're right. Shadow the Warp, Synapse, they basically always exist with Tyranids, and they always kind of have to. They're just like the big everyone can say it type thing. But I think adaptability is one of the key parts of a Tyranid identity lore-wise. But yeah, that actually is all of the factions now. This was a really long topic. Before you leave, do take a moment, if you haven't already, in a rage because you disagreed so much. Give us your thoughts, because I honestly do care on this one. I will be reading a lot of the comments because this is like the type of discussion I really enjoy when it comes to game design.
Well, and a large part of what we've been talking about is emotional. So like our thoughts are going to be different than other people.
It is going to be a very personal, subjective answer for a lot of these for what you consider your core of your army. Some of it will be more backed up by like every single lore book mentions this. Other ones less so when it's like, show me your Tyranids lore.
But at the same time, it's interesting to hear like other people's thoughts, because like I can't get into the mindset of somebody who has vastly different emotional attachment to like Black Templars. So yeah, just, you know, let us know where you kind of agreed or like, wow, this is really far off from what.
Yeah, you're way off base on this one. But as a final thing before we go, we've got to thank our patrons for the month, because as we joked about at the beginning with the cold open there, it's been a great last few weeks for me over here. For keeping the lights on over here, sometimes literally, we have to thank our patrons who support us at patreon.com/solely-singleton, just in case you want to join them. Like great patrons like Garrett Johnson, but we have a bunch of them who are so awesome we have to shout them out every month. They are a pulsating ball of pure energy,
A suspicious looking guy,
Absolute Chad,
a dachshund,
Adrian Franca,
Alex Fuja,
Amdragon,
a mists,
Andreas,
another hairy Sasquatch,
Ava Hall,
Beth Jesus,
Biggs the Purple Necron,
Blubbles 180,
Carnuvex,
Christopher Gargliano,
Christopher Stevens,
Chroma Veil,
Colin H,
Comstar Wizard Tresnor,
Craig Judge,
Cube 1359,
Dairy Sorcerer Addicted to Mana Potions,
Daniel Field 5150,
Das Goopy,
Delmarev,
Dominic Colisico,
Dylan Baker,
Edward Lawrence,
Enchanted Galaxy Cat.
Enchanted Decat.
Yeah, dude, I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore.
Get some like repressed memory coming out. What the fuck was that? Eric Founder,
Ezilvor,
Faye,
Flawless Oyster,
Gathering Clouds,
Gear Overlord,
Geet,
Grundle Bundle 2, Electric Grundalo.
Hoss Hammond,
I miss reflecting shots with Lich Guard shields.
E.
I think there might have been an L in there. Elindi,
Infinite Fez. Get back to making me pies.
Isaac Hall,
Jack Gaming,
Jacob Gibson,
Jarrett DePerna,
Jason McMaster,
Jolene,
Justin Udchak,
Calix,
Katie and Moore,
Cantorb,
Lucas,
LSJ,
Madison Ramanama,
Matthew Tsushima,
Michael Melcher,
Mitchell,
Mixolodius,
Burnt Toast,
Moist Toast,
Monkey 218,
Morpheal 55,
Nemesis the Noodle Blade,
Nick DeFeo,
Not EE.
Novi,
Pierce forgot about changing their name as a bit for a while.
Proteus 7331,
QBN Geek.
Quellen,
I hate this. I hate this.
dodged a bullet here.
Ragnar's secret collection of sexy wolf magazines. This is why we make fun of you, Space Wolf players. This is why.
I think it's hilarious. Ratchet 7989,
Retro Brave,
Rock,
Ross Warlock,
Saft,
Sriracha Sauce,
Shax's Pet Otter,
Solanite,
Strugabus,
The Mailman.
the most pleasant mother pheasant pluck.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Okay. The most pleasant mother pheasant plucker.
Close enough. The Crusader 13,
The Fish Boy,
Thrango,
Tom McGrath,
Vartha Mark,
Victoria Angel,
Warhammer Caleb,
Weebay.
Woodstock,
You are invited to the Salt City GT in Syracuse, New York, please.
Why So Mad 2.
And Zimbabwe.
And we also have producers who we thank every week because they are so great to us. They are 3D Frank,
A Moist Skeleton.
Aetherion the Infinite,
Bender XX.
Blisted Brain. Hey,
Yeah.
you ever wonder why we're here?
It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it?
Brad Space Wolves are really cool. Just look at the Adepticon previews. That was months ago. Did you forget to log in to your Patreon and change your name?
Yeah, but you did nail that. Hold on. Brandon Janke.
Broken Reaper 45.
Chapter Master Bader of the Cranked Hogs Legion.
Is this Spooty? Corvus.
Dr. Lace.
Gilgamesh Versus.
Halo Gamer 2005.
I got my mech boy to make me a shiny new buggy.
Yon Guy C.
Kiwi Fruitbird.
Le Bloop Bloop.
Mr. Squiggums.
Mr. Festastic. Hashtag Where's Mike's Baneblade?
Eric.
Yeah,
Eric.
I know.
It's Thursday. It's been 4 days this week. What have you done?
Yeah.
NJ Harlan.
One-Eyed Hive Mind.
Pizza 00100.
Primaris Brotherhood Terminator Squad. Oh, wait.
Oh, you actually got it this time. That's great. Sebastian Richardson.
That Moiety.
Victorian Batman.
And Wargame Simulator. Thank you so much for supporting the show.
You guys mean a lot right now.
It is quite nice.
All right. That does it for this week's episode. We are out of here. Play the music, Borelio.
Sounds good.